I want to start with just the bare bones basics, how to figure out the chords in a key, and then how to use them to just make something that sounds interesting to you. Then we're going to try to expand into a couple different voicings and then think about how to apply that very basic information to a band situation. In case you're jamming with a bass player, I brought my bass out. And we'll get into a little recording software and kind of have fun with it. And yeah, and I think a good starting point here would be to just hop over to my iPad, which is this button, and we got to pick a key first. And I think what we could do here is let's pick the key of D major. Right? So, if you remember your major scale formula, if I just write out the letters in order, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, and then we go through and we write in our whole, half, whole, half. This is how you make a major scale. The only problem is I just wrote the alphabet. We got to go through and double check. So D to E, is that a whole step? I have an idea. Let's do this over here on the camera guitar because I can do it live. So let's try this out. If I grab a D here and I'm trying to get, I think I can do this. There we go, perfect. If I'm gonna play a D to an E, and that needs to be a whole step, well, it is, so we're good. Now we need to go another whole step. F is not a whole step, so I actually need to go from E to F sharp. So now I've got F sharp. Now I need to go a half step. F sharp to G, good, that's a half step. Then G to A is supposed to be a whole step to fit the major scale formula, and it is, so we're good. Then we go A to B, that's another whole step. And then B to, B to C is a half step. We need it to be a whole step, so we gotta sharp that C. And then we end on D, a half step from there. So if I were to punch this in as a nice little scale here, we got D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. And so this is what it looks like sort of in music theory. The little circle just shows you how that works. If we want to play a D major scale on the guitar, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. So here's where things get really cool. Of course, we know that if we're in the key of D major, we can play a D major chord. That goes with the scale, right? Well, a D major chord is made from taking every other note of the scale starting on D. So we can go D, F sharp, A, but we can also go E, G, B. That's every other note starting on E. That gives us an E minor chord. We can also do the same thing starting on F. F sharp, A, C sharp. That gives us an F sharp minor chord. Do the same thing for G. Every other note, that gives us a G major chord. And then every other note on A gives us an A major chord. Every other note starting on B, B, D, F sharp, that gives us a B minor chord. And then C sharp, E, and G, that gives us a funky diminished triad. So, cool, right? So that was our D major scale, but the chords in the key of D are D, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor, and C sharp diminished. If we're using Roman numerals, just like, who is that? Billingtano said, wait, there's more than 1, 4, 5? Yeah, there's also 2 and 3, and there's your 4 and 5 right there. Then we got 6 and 7. So if you know these chords, that's great. If you don't, you can look them up or you can figure them out, which is kind of fun. I got some lessons about how to figure that stuff out on my Patreon. Today we're doing a little bit more of a fast track to get to writing. But pretty cool, right? So here's our chords: D, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor, and C sharp diminished, and then we're back to D. Very cool. Now here is where things can get really fun. By the way, in case you didn't know, what it means to be in the key of D major, because we talk about scales and we talk about keys. Sometimes people use those terms synonymously, but they're not really the same thing. A D major scale is, let's see, ooh, what's the best? Here we go. A D major scale is, it's kind of like reciting the alphabet when we're going A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. You're not speaking English, but you are putting the letters that we use to make words in the order that we usually recite them, right? A scale is kind of similar. We're saying this is the alphabet we're choosing to make some music. That's what it means to play a scale. A scale is the linear, you know, played thing. But if we want to be in the key of D, we're not really playing the scale as much as we're using the scale to construct our chords. And then we're using that scale to construct our melodies. Right? I'm only playing those green notes that we already chose as our scale. And when I'm choosing just those notes, I'm staying in the key of D. Pretty cool. But we got some stuff to work on here because, and of course I dropped my pen. Now that we've established this info, which is, you know, some pretty useful info. You know, any questions so far, by the way? It's always worth asking. Now that we've got our chords, what do we do? How do you use this to write music? This is where things can get kind of scary because the truth is you just pick a few that you like and then you pick a strumming pattern that you like. And if anyone has any questions about how to write a strumming pattern, I can give you a little crash course. Just let me know in the chat. I'm just gonna make sure that things are still going strong here. Yes, they are. Very nice. Yeah, don't be shy. Feel free to ask some questions. This is definitely a live lesson and I look forward to your questions. But what you can do here is you can just pick a few of these chords and you can either think I'm gonna pick the number and I'm gonna mess around with what it feels like to play this set of chords, which would be D, E minor, A, B minor, and just see how it sounds. See what you think. Check it out. Yeah. So here we got a D. Let's try this out. And I'll show you my guitar a little better here. Let's see. So here's D major, here's E minor, here's A major, here's a B minor, D major, E minor, A major, B minor. That's a nice chord progression. I like that. So I did get a request from someone to, Freddie King says, strumming pattern, please. Yeah, I'll give you a quick little thing to think about. Also, someone asked about the hat. I don't know, I just felt like wearing a hat. It's a Frisco Freeze, a nice little, you know, old burger joint down in Tacoma where I grew up. So we've picked a nice little progression here. Let's talk about strumming patterns for a second. The way I like to think about coming up with a strumming pattern is I start with a simple grid of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And the way I like to think about strumming patterns is I like to do a little reductive method here. So anytime you're doing a strumming pattern, what you want to think about is this little graph right here. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's how you want your arm to be moving all the time, anytime you're playing a strumming pattern. So it doesn't matter what chord I'm playing. You want your arm, if you were to plug your ears and just watch yourself playing guitar, this is how your arm should look regardless of the strumming pattern you're playing, with very few exceptions. So in other words, if I'm playing something like you always want your arm to be doing this. So the way you can practice is you can start with the full down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, which sounds pretty intense. Right. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's pretty intense. But if you remove a strum, keeping in mind that your arm is still going to move up right there, you're just not going to hit the strings. All of a sudden, it starts to sound more like a pattern. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and... Right? Then, we can start removing more strums here. How about down, down, up, down, up, down. And now, we've got down, down, up, down, up, down. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Right? And then if we remove one more, how about this down right here? Now we've got and this is a really fun way to just craft your own strumming patterns, is just start by strumming everything and then just remove a few strums here and there until you get something interesting. So let's try this strumming pattern that we just came up with, and then let's see if we can put this into some recording software. So here I've got down, down, up, up, down. Kind of cool, right? So that's your basics. Sometimes people get scared about something like, well, which chord am I allowed to start with? And there is some kind of funkiness going on where you might end up in what's called a mode, where you're in sort of a different key that uses the same chords. But when you're just writing music for yourself, just starting out, getting the hang of making stuff that sounds good, you can take this set of chords. You can grab any chord you want and just see how it sounds and play a few of them. Like, how about E minor, F minor, G, F minor. That sounds kind of cool. E minor, F sharp minor, G. Right? There is, it's not that there are rules. It's more that the more you get the hang of what sounds good to you, music theory is really just about getting the hang of explaining how other musicians should interact with something you've written, being able to explain what you've done. But we're not going deep in the weeds today, we're just trying to have fun with it. So, here's where things get really cool, in my opinion. Once you have a chord progression like this, and again, D, E minor, A, B minor, if you're playing by yourself, it's kind of nice to strum all the strings and to try to create like a nice solid rhythm that you're carrying yourself. But once you start playing with other musicians, you can actually be a little more free. You don't have to play quite as much. And this is where I think it might be fun to make a little beat and sort of pretend we're in a band for a second here. I mean, I'm also actually in a band, but for the sake of this video, we're pretending. Can you hear that okay? Here's my recording software. And I'm just gonna make a little beat. Let's see, what's a good tempo? Let's keep it slow. We don't need to go too fast. How about, this is nice. 102, that sounds good. I'm gonna turn these drums down for a second so I can hear that metronome, but 2, 3, 4. Cool. Made a little beat, and I'm just gonna fix the timing because I don't need to be a perfectionist about that right now. Let's make sure it's all good. Here's my... That sounds good. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna record my guitar, and I'll show you how we can have so much fun with a second guitar by grabbing a cable here. Let me see here. So we'll do the most basic strumming pattern, and I'm gonna plug in this cool minty green cable here. Yeah, my philosophy about learning guitar, learning music in general, is you got to get to the point where you can write something as soon as possible, because just like music is a language, and when you learn to speak a language, that's fun. Oh, that's me. The sooner you get to a point where you can express your own thoughts and feelings, the sooner you'll sort of get the hang of like what it even means to play music. It's great to learn other people's songs. By all means, do that. Do that for the rest of your life. But also learn how to mess around with a chord progression like this, and it'll teach you things you never thought you needed to learn. And it'll give you sort of endless entertainment. So what I'm doing here, I'm going back to my software. I don't know why this is opened so huge. I gotta make it smaller. This is just a little amp simulator software, just so we can get something going here. That sounds nice. So I'm gonna record the most basic sort of cowboy chord version of this progression that I can. And I'm gonna keep it very simple. And I'm gonna do that so that we can add some fancier layers on top. That's all we need. I'm not trying to spend too much time on it. It's a little sloppy. That'll be okay. We're just having fun. We're not trying to write, you know, a platinum album or anything. But I'm gonna make it a little less spiky sounding. So, here's where things get cool. And I'm gonna go back over to the camera guitar, and I'm sure I'm gonna get absolutely tangled up in this web of cables that are attached to me here. So, I got a lot of stuff connected to me over here. So, if we're back in the key of D here, what I was just playing, the most basic open chords here. And I'm not trying to be a perfectionist, because I'm not writing a finished album right now. I'm just practicing writing music, and this is what makes it fun. If you get too perfectionist about it, you kind of lose sight of the whole point, which is to just make something. You don't have to make it perfect, just the idea is to make something. So our first chord here is this D major chord, and I played it down here. But a D major chord is just made of D, F sharp, and A. So I'm gonna loop that D chord for a second, and I just wanna show you some cool things you can do instead of just strumming the chords. Check it out. So this is the rhythm guitar, right? So what I could do is I could go up here and I could go, wow. Unfortunately, one of my guitars is not in tune. I'm gonna put a funny effect on it to just make it feel a little more in tune. This is, by the way, something that can happen if you're not paying attention. Let's see if this, that's better. So, here, what I just did is I've got a D, an A, and an F sharp. All the notes in blue, by the way, are just the notes in a D major chord. So instead of doing the same thing that the other guitar player is doing, I can accent that chord up here. Or I can go, or I can do some up here. Right? The possibilities are endless. You just kind of come up with a little pattern like boo dee 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 dee, right? That's the idea. If we scoot over to the next chord, which was, what did we say it was? E minor, that's right. Let me scratch that, and now we're gonna move into E minor. Well, before I was doing something like, now I can do, very cool, right? And if I try that out, let's see how it sounds. And it turns out, for the next two chords, I can do something with those chords around the same area here. I could go, I keep forgetting what the chord is, that's funny. C sharp, E, and A. So I went, this is the D chord, this is the E minor, and then the B minor chord is the next one. See how I just grabbed A, C sharp, E. This is why it's so cool to know just a little bit of theory. If you know that an A major chord is made of A, C sharp, and E, you can find those chords somewhere else. Charlotte said, is that a broken chord or an arpeggio? It's really, I'm just taking the tones of the chord and I'm just playing them individually in whatever interesting pattern I feel like. You could say it's an arpeggio, although arpeggio, kind of like playing a scale, sometimes arpeggio means playing everything in perfect order, and I'm just kind of not doing it in order. But this is the kind of fun thing, you can just kind of do whatever you want. This is the freedom that music theory gives you, is it just says, these are the notes in the chord, what do you want to do with it? And the final chord here is a B minor, which is B, D, F sharp. So we go here. So I'm going to turn these off so that we're not watching one chord while all the chords are happening. But we've got a D chord, an E minor, an A, and a B minor. So D chord, E minor, A, B minor. Check it out. Isn't that kind of cool? I think it's cool. There's more we can do though, and this is probably a good opportunity for me to get my guitar in better tune so that we don't keep having to fix it later. So, Paul, hey, yes, this is a live session. I'm doing a live writing session here, and just trying to have fun with it. And I can get to your questions a little bit better if you want. Oh, that was the problem. I'm very sharp. Let me turn off this funky effect. There we go. So, just got to get in tune here. And then we're going to talk about sort of, you know, writing parts. When you have a band to support you, you don't have to play everything, but you also don't have to play just the little arpeggio things we were playing either. Let me just get in tune here. You can see what I'm doing here if you want. Tune a little flat, and then I tune up to the note because sometimes my strings get a little sticky. See if that's close enough for a live stream. So, before I was doing your basic So, before I was doing that, and there's something kind of fun about adding, even just adding a bass player. Because what a bass player does is they will accent the root of the chord, and they'll also accent the low end of the chord. And part of what's sort of tricky about being a guitar player, especially because guitar is such a sort of, there are so many different genres of guitar out there that it's kind of hard to figure out you know, what's the right thing to do in any given situation? There's so many different traditions, it can be hard to figure out. But, is my bass, oh, it's just not. Yeah, by the way, I see some questions. Blarnathan, this is sort of some live fretboard software that I and a friend came up with, and I'm not sharing how it works yet. Maybe someday. Yeah, this guitar is missing 2 strings, isn't it? I learned my lesson earlier by just picking up the guitar. It was very sharp, so now I'm gonna make sure that I'm in at least better tune here. Yeah. So let's listen to this. This is just a strumming pattern by itself. And one of the cool things about guitar is that it keeps its own rhythm so well that you almost don't even need that drum track. Guitar itself is kind of a little drum set, which is why it's so handy for just backing yourself up solo. But now, if I'm gonna add bass, it actually frees my guitar up to not have to do so much intense strumming. So if I'm going, oops, of course I forgot the chords. I have them right in front of me here, and I keep forgetting. It's D, E minor, A, B minor. So I'm gonna come up with a little bass line here. I guess maybe it'd be more fun to watch my hands than to watch the software. And my goal is to accent root notes. And then I'm gonna accent fifths of the chord. So a triad is made of root, third, and fifth. Like the D, F sharp, and A of a D major chord. That's D is the root, F sharp's the third, and A is the fifth. Bass players tend to accent roots and fifths, and don't always, there's never any hard rules, but typically avoiding thirds is a good idea. So I'm gonna accent root, 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 fifth, root, 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 fifth. Yep, root, fifth, root, root, root. Oh, you can't hear the bass well enough? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put an effect on the bass so that everyone can hear it a little better. I'm gonna throw a little compression on here. We'll do a slow attack, do a fast release, and we're gonna do this. There we go. That should be a little louder. And let's do this. D, E minor, A, B minor. I got a little sloppy. There we go. So that's the gist. And now, if we listen to that, let's listen back to it and see how it sounds. That's just a rough bass line, which reminds me I'm wearing the wrong headphones I got these tiny headphones. I'll have to switch if I'm trying to get a little more detailed here so I can hear better, but. So that sounds great, just with the open chords. But let's see what happens if instead of playing the cowboy chords, if we play some higher up voicings. And actually, I'll go back over to the camera guitar for this. And I'll hit this button. And let's see what happens here. So, let's see. I'm gonna set this up so that I have a little count in every time. That should do it. So here we are in the key of D, and we were playing, which is D major, E minor, A major, B major, B minor, excuse me. That's very much a minor chord. So let's just hear how that sounds and see what it looks like, and then we're gonna move on to something else. So we've got it sounds all right. Right? That sounds fine. But, oh, Lewis has a good question. I'll get to it in a minute. I like it. So, we were doing that, and then before we were going. But if we listen to that, just that with the bass, let's see how that sounds. It might feel like it needs more space, and we're gonna find a little middle ground version where we're not doing the whole open chords and we're not doing up here. But let's just see how it sounds. 2, 3, 4. That's kind of nice actually, but it does feel a little bit empty. So this is where we get into moving from here into maybe a little more interesting voicings. And that could be just, the way I like to think of it basically is just playing fewer notes, but not way up the neck. So if we're going like, that's kind of fun. You get to add a rhythm that doesn't keep your arm going the whole time and lets it kind of almost like breathe with the drums a little bit more. I don't know if that's the one, but let's see how it sounds. So I'm going. That's kind of nice. But do you see how that just kind of opens it up compared to the cowboy chords? And I'm still playing the same chords, I'm just playing them in a different location on the neck. That's pretty cool, right? Makes it a little more fun. I'm not in love with that pattern though. Let me find something. Sometimes just hitting on the snares of the drum kit. In other words, this is the drums. That's the snare. It's always hitting on 2 and 4 if you're in 4/4. And by always, I mean usually in rock and soul and funk. But let's see how it sounds to just hit on the snares with the bass. I bet it's gonna sound nice. I know it is, but let's see what happens. Pretty cool, right? So, here's what I'm gonna do. Woo! So many cables in here. I am gonna take a break from writing music here, tinkering with this kind of stuff. I'd like to move on to, someone brought up, what about 7ths and 9ths and 11ths and stuff? This is also where music theory makes things so fun and cool. But I'm gonna move on to that in a minute because I got a few questions here, including longtime commenter on my channel, Phil James says, do you feel that the quality and ability of the Akai LPK25 keyboard is sufficient for the needs of the average computer user? Yes, this is actually my second one. My first one, I thought it broke, but I actually had such an old computer that one of the USB inputs just gave out. I love this thing. It's very travel size. It looks big because of my camera here, but it's quite tiny, and it fits in a backpack. And I love it. I'm not a piano player, I'm a guitar player, but this for just doing basic inputs of drums is great. So highly recommend the Akai LPK 25. It's great, it's cheap. TJ Anderson said, how do you write down the strumming pattern of the bass, hypothetically? You know, most bass players that I know would either listen to the record and then just memorize how it sounds, or they'd write it out in like proper sheet music, or they would make something up that's in the style. And there are sort of stylistic things that are pretty common. For example, you know, your classic bass go-to, in other words, the most basic thing you can do on a bass is to start by just hitting root notes on the kick. So if you listen for the kick, hear that? And now if you listen to the bass line that I wrote, I'm basically just following that kick. And that's often, you know, I mean, of course we could talk for hours about bass, but that's a really good starting point if you're playing bass, is just listen for the kick drum. In general, if you're a bass player, you always want to listen for the drummer as closely as possible and almost ignore everyone else. But Lewis asked a great question. Lewis said, Scott, I have seen that chord progression changes in choruses. Is there a guideline for this part as well? I don't know if I'm being clear. So I think you're being clear enough. And it sounds like what you're saying is usually when you get to the chorus in a song, it's a different chord progression than the verse. And that's true. And maybe that's a good chance to move on and try to write something else here. Although I just wanted to see. Paul Richardson said, can you do an overview of how to use Apple GarageBand? I actually have a whole course on it on my Patreon. It's like 12 bucks a month. And I've got, I think, over 200 lessons on there so far. And I have a live Q&A where many fewer people are asking questions and I answer them all every week, just like this with the camera guitar and everything. But yeah, it's a great course. And I also have tons of community challenges where my patrons get together and write some music based on a theme. It might be something simple like write something in an A minor, or it might be something like write something sad, or write something in Mixolydian mode, which you can also learn how to do on my Patreon. It's pretty great. It's not a donation site, it's a music school. Yeah. I don't know how to say her name, Facidi said, do we have to play the chord tones along with the chords, or can we play the whole scale as well? I would say watch my latest video called 5 Levels of Soloing, because in there I talk about this sort of concept where if the rhythm part is a D chord, it's probably ideal to start your phrases on just a note in the chord. So there I started a phrase on a note that's part of the D chord, and then I ended the phrase on a note that's part of the D chord. And the idea is you have not just the whole scale available to you, but all 12 notes available to you, as long as you sort of have a hierarchy of which ones, you know, you take more seriously. You weigh those notes a little more heavily. And that's the idea of sort of soloing over chord tones. MAW, yeah, I'm sort of not necessarily gearing this just for beginners, but you can learn everything I'm talking about over on my online school. I'm not going to promote it all day, but yeah, man, so much support and kindness. Thank you, everybody. So 2 things I want to do next. One, I want to talk about 7th chords and 9th chords and how they can make your chord progression so much more spicy, which is really fun. And then the second thing I want to do is come up with another chord progression that goes with this one, because this is sort of how verses and choruses work. So we're going into the iPad again, and I'm gonna sort of, yeah, there we go. I'm gonna try to reveal my set of chords over here. So this is one set of chords. I'm actually gonna squish them together so I have room to put another chord progression here. And what do we wanna do for our other section? And when you're writing music, by the way, first of all, I feel like so many people are afraid to write music because they're like, what if I suck at writing music? And the reality is, you're probably gonna suck when you start out, because writing music isn't a magic skill that people have or don't have. It takes practice. Just like learning guitar takes practice. Nobody picks up a guitar and is like, wow, my fingertips feel great and I can totally do everything I wanted to do by just reading a book and playing. No, everything takes practice. Learning the instrument, same thing with writing songs. So while we are gonna talk a bit about choruses, a lot of it comes down to personal taste. How do you like to craft the difference between a verse and a chorus? And the way you even get to a point where you could think that way is by just mashing together different chord progressions and talking to yourself about what you like or don't like about them. So we're gonna do that here. We've already got let's see. Something that's always fun is to sort of weigh a new chord that you haven't used yet. For example, we haven't used G yet. We haven't used F sharp minor. And that's about it. We haven't used the diminished chord, but though they don't make their way into popular music quite as much as other things. So what I might do is I might try to emphasize these two missing chords in my second section, or I might try to make an even more simple chord progression. So, an awesome Creeper 54, I see your question. I'll get to it on my next break here. So, let's see, how would it sound to play G, F sharp minor? That's kind of interesting. I just did G, F sharp minor, G, and D. That's nice. I don't know if I love it though, but yeah. I don't know. This is also a normal thing. I know I like this. G, and, oh, well, there we go. G, F sharp minor, G. Let's do that. Maybe for our second section here, we're gonna do this actually. We're gonna go G, F sharp minor, G, D, and then the second time through, we're gonna go G, F sharp minor, A. This, by the way, is an awesome way to think about writing chord progressions. What I did is I wrote one thing that I kind of liked, and then I just sort of split it in half for fun. And then the second time I went, I'm gonna keep that first half, but I'm gonna change the second half. And this little chord progression by itself is gonna sound pretty nice, because once you get to this second F sharp minor, you're expecting to go G, D, but instead you're just hanging out on A. So it sounds like this. And I think, here we go. That's kind of nice. Let's see how it sounds compared to the other progression. So here's the first progression, E minor, A, B minor. Now I'm going to the next one. Yeah, that's nice. I like it. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but I changed the strumming pattern a little bit on my other section here. It's kind of cool. This is the basic idea of how to do it. And the thing that I cannot emphasize this enough. you don't want to set out to write one perfect song and then move on to the next song. You want to create almost like a junkyard of half-written things, because that means you're practicing, you're trying, you're tinkering. You want to be much more of a tinkerer if you want to have fun writing music. If if you're the kind of person who's like, I need to finish everything I start, you're probably gonna have a hard time being a songwriter, because it's healthy and fun to have a boneyard of unfinished things. And that's just because you need to practice. It takes practice to figure this stuff out. So what I'm gonna do here is, I've already got my first chord progression. Here we go. And I can't remember if I redid this so it was in tune. I don't think I did, so I'm gonna re-record the first one so it's in tune. And what I'm gonna do here is, I'm gonna take the little drums that I wrote, and I'm just gonna change them a little bit for the second time through. You don't have to be a drummer. You can just kind of tinker with making things a little different. And I think what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take this called a ride cymbal, and I'm just gonna scoot it down to hi-hat. Just gives it a different sound, right? So now we've got these two sections, and I'll play along with my bass line that I already wrote. And then on the guitar here, I'm gonna play along with my bass line, and then I'm going to, I'll just kind of experiment with how I want to do that second chord progression. And keeping in mind that I probably need to do some cutting and pasting if I want this to be a full song. But for now, we're doing good. And yeah, let's see here. What do we have? So, let me do this. Since I recorded it out of tune first, I'm just gonna record that first part. And maybe what I'll do is I'll record it the way that we if you were watching earlier, we found a middle ground between just playing cowboy chords and just playing. And instead what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play something like. Because I'm not playing the low strings, and that's a good thing if you're playing with a bass player. Guitar is weird because the lowest strings are almost in that bass territory, and it can make your mix sound kind of muddy, which a mix isn't just for the recording studio, it's also for a live gig. A bass player will love playing with you if you avoid those bottom strings as a general rule. You don't have to do it perfectly. But here we go. So. So that'll do for that first section. Sounds good. I'm gonna move on to the next section here and figure out, how do I wanna get this next chord progression, which looks like this: G, F sharp minor, G, D, and then G, F sharp minor, A, A. And this one, I might get a little more creative with it. Generally speaking, for me, when I think about comparing a verse and a chorus, or just a section of a song with another section, to create a little bit of contrast, if I'm doing... There's a lot of space there. Maybe in the next section I'll try to leave a little less space just as a comparison. So I might do something like... Something like that. It's just a little more constant, but let's see. See if that actually works. That's nice. It's a little sloppy. I should probably switch to my other headphones so I can hear better, but whatever. Honestly, it would probably be beneficial to whip out these headphones just so I make sure that the mix sounds good enough for YouTube. It would be sad for me to listen back to this later and go, oh, that didn't sound very good. That sounds pretty good. So now what I can do is, just like we were talking about before with our bass line, if we want to match the kick drum, we can. But let's listen to what we were doing the first time through here. That sounds good. So the question here is, to create a little contrast, I kind of like the guitar parts, how different they are. They're similar, but they're not the same. This one's kind of a little more constant. This one gives a little more space. This bass line, it's a little more constant. Let's see, I don't know, I'm just gonna play with it for a minute. That's kind of cool. I kind of like something like that. So this is a kind of a sneaky thing. I started on G and I walked up G, A, B, but I ended up on D. So remember I was saying you don't usually play the third of the chord. In this case, I walked up to the third of the chord, and then I jumped to the root note of that F sharp minor. So my G chord, and then F sharp minor. Yeah, and I kind of like that. So let's try this. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So that is kind of what it looks like to write a second section. So now I'm gonna make it a little bigger here. A little bigger. That's a very detailed word. I'm gonna make the first section longer so we have this nice little back to back here. Here's the next section. Hey, that's kind of fun, huh? So that's the nice, that's a good starting point. I think, wow, we've been going an hour already. Man. Yeah, why don't we just keep it going? I don't know. Sometimes it's just too much for people to go, oh my gosh, a 2-hour stream. I don't know if that sounds fun, but maybe for the right person it will. I'm gonna take a break for questions here though. So MAW says, what's the name of the program you're using? This is called Logic Pro, and it is my favorite recording software. It's made by Apple, and I've seen it in a few pro studios. It used to be, what, like 10 years ago? I don't think it was in any pro studios, but it's gotten to the level where a lot of people prefer it. I like it for doing this kind of thing, which is when I'm writing songs, I'm not worried about getting the most perfect performance. And this copy and paste kind of stuff to just get a song started is one of my favorite things to do. I can always go do a perfect recording in the studio when it's time to like get those perfect recordings, or for fun, for practice if I want to, but you don't need to. It's great. Oh, it's not an hour. We started late. That's a good point. Yeah, let's see. We could do some targeting chord tones a little bit. Lauren, if you're not Apple, there's great software called Reaper, R-E-A-P-E-R, that I think it's free to start using it, and then it's $60 to buy. There we go. And a lot of PC users have really liked that. Yeah, there you go. Couple glowing reviews right there. Did we get any other questions before I move on to the next section here? Just thanks for all the compliments, dang. Yeah, so let's see. Henry Hood says, can you explain where and why 9 chords can be used in a key, as in which chord number can be a 9 chord? Yeah, sure. I mean, that's what we're gonna do next. It's kind of fun anyway. So, check this out. I am gonna go back to the iPad. I'm gonna scoot some things around, and I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make a scale circle, and D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp. So this is what I like to call a scale circle, because it is a scale in a circle. And you know, if you put in your, I'll do it tiny, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. We know that moving from here to here, 2 whole steps, the distance between D and F sharp is a major third, kind of cool. The distance between here and here is a minor third, because it's a half step and a whole step. And anytime you start with a major third and then attach a minor third to it, that is always going to be a major triad. This is where things get really cool. If you take this same triad, which we've created it by jumping every other note of this major scale. Well, if we jump one more every other, we've added a 4th note to our chord. It's no longer a triad, it is now a 7th chord. And in this case, we've added a major third to the end of this major triad, which is very weird. And it's so weird that I'm gonna use the camera guitar to help explain. But just like we were talking about earlier, here's that D root note. Check out the circle. I'm skipping a note to play the 3rd of the chord, then skipping another note of the scale to play the 5th of the chord, and then that is the 7th of this D major chord, turning it into a D major 7 chord. And wow, what a beautiful chord it is. And here's one of the weirdest things about music theory in general. If I, and Renato, I see your question. I think we'll try that later if we can. Someone said, can you write something less churchy? I can. I was trying to write something simple, and somehow that ended up sounding churchy, but whatever. When you're thinking about chords as Roman numerals, what this sort of frees you up to think about, and I'm gonna go back to, this has gotten very messy here, but I'm going to, is this the right button? Here we go. These chords, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. A Roman numeral just represents the chord made from the first note of the scale. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to play just root, third, and fifth. It means you can also play the seventh if you want to. And if we did that on top of what I just played here, it might clash a little bit, but it might not. Let's see. Here, I'll just get that first D major chord and see what happens. What do we have here? Yeah, so in this case, because I played this chord, it's gonna sound a little clashy. Just because my highest note is this chord. But if let's listen to this bass line. So these are the first two chords. So instead of playing, if I played this, suddenly it's gonna sound a little fancier, a little spicier. And then instead of playing just an E minor chord, for the next chord I could play an E minor 7 chord, which is, let me show you how that works real quick. So in the same sense that we did every other, and then we just did one more every other, that gets us the 7th chord that fits in this key. In this case, and in every case, the 1 chord in a major key is always a major 7 chord. If we go to the 2 chord, that would be E, G, and B. If we were going to do another every other from there, we would be adding a D to our chord, and now we can play an E minor 7 chord. And it just gives you a little richness, a little fanciness. So I'll play these 2 chords back to back, the original way first, and then I'll play the fancy way, and you tell me if it sounds a little more jazzy or a little more kind of sultry or more, I don't know, more interesting. 2, 3, 4. Kind of cool, right? Here's the original way. We're coming up on it. 3, 3, 4. So this is original. And then here's the 7th chord. Isn't that kind of cool? Looks like all my notes were not perfectly appearing every time, but isn't that kind of cool? This is, I have a lot of lessons about this kind of stuff where you can really dive in and get to know this concept a little bit better. But in general, the idea is you're just playing every other note till you get 3, and that gives you the triad. And then if you do another every other, that gives you the 7th chord. It's pretty cool. Here's your minor 7, and then the F minor gives you another minor 7. This is sort of the complicated way to think about it. The easiest way to think about it is find your highest root note and then go back to the next note in the scale behind it. And that's how you convert any chord in the key to its 7th chord. So in this case, in the key, A has to go back a whole step, gives it a, excuse me, there we go. And then the G chord here just went back half a step. Of course, some of you might be like, what the heck is he talking about right now? This is kind of a big concept. I have a course on my Patreon called Music Theory for Guitar that brings you up to speed on the absolute basics of how to make scales, major scales and minor scales, and then why do they need sharps and flats at all, and how they fit into the circle of fifths, and then how to make major, minor triads and also diminished and augmented triads. It's kind of cool. And that sets you up to learn chords in a key really, really well, which is great. But yeah, I think because of the way I recorded it, the original guitar. I don't think it would sound very good to have a 7th chords over the top of that one. This section might sound cool to have some 7th chords. Let's see. Yeah. If they were really high up, that might sound cool. Let's see what happens in this section. That's kind of nice. I like it in the second section. The first section, just, it's hard to add another high up guitar on there. Cool. So let's see. Does anyone have any more questions for me? I think that, yeah, Renato, this isn't the best idea. This isn't the best version to write a second guitar on top, but I did mention something earlier about how, like, kind of how to set things up to write a second guitar. Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of questions, so I don't know. Do you got any for me? Don't be shy. Oh, Henry, 9 chords. Yes, of course. All right, fine. Let's do it. Fine. Pretending to be upset about teaching more stuff. Okay. So, this is very cool. We're going into this mode again. So, I'm gonna give you a quiz. We got root, 3rd, 5th, and 7 if we want to play a 7 chord. And there's a hint in there, right? 1, 3, 5, 7. What do you think a D, the 9 chord of a D chord would be? We're gonna do every other another time. So we have root, 3rd, 5th, 7, and 9. And this is where things get sort of jazzy, complicated, convoluted. And I don't need to go there. I'm gonna give you the cheat code that just gives you like a cool thing to think about here. And this is, in the same sense that if you play any major chord or minor chord in a key, and you'd find the highest root note you can find, and you just go back a note in the scale. It's got to be in the scale because we got to stay in the key, right? That gives us a major 7 chord or some kind of 7 chord. Let's not worry about names for now. It gives you some kind of 7 chord. So if I were to go up to this G chord here, I found my highest root, I go back a note in the scale, and that gives me the 7 chord for the G in the key of D. If I want to find the 9 of a chord, it's a different thing. We find that root note and we go up 1 note in the scale. And now I have some sort of D chord with a 9. And 9 chords, they're very cool. In this case, this is called an add 9 because I've just taken a triad, root, 3rd, and 5th, and then I've just added 9. That's what it means when you play an add chord. If I want to do this with an E minor chord, I can go like this, but I lose my 3rd. This is where it gets tricky. I can go like this. It's not very fun to play, but this is an E minor add 9. There's a nice open chord version that looks like this, E minor add 9. Let me do a little zoom in. Here you go. You can look nice and close here. Yeah. Play an E minor chord. And then we find this E scooted up a whole step because we found a root note, right? And we just go up a note in the scale. Now I've got this devastating, beautiful chord. Or we can go up here and add it up here. Also very tasty. And this is the easiest way to think about 9 chords. And if I was gonna play this progression with 9 chords. Oh, and then I want to show you something very cool. Ooh, this is going to be fun. If I want to play this progression with 9 chords, I could go and then go down to and then we had an A chord. That's kind of nice. Let's see how it sounds. Let me make sure I'm on the right track here. 2, 3. Oh, I didn't get there quick enough. There we go. I'm jumping too far, but I could go, what is this? Up here? Isn't that kind of fun? Yeah, that's very cool, right? I think I don't want to get too far in the weeds with this, but just remember, you play a chord, you find the root note. If you go back half a step, that's the 7. You can either think of it as, that's like, I don't think I can condense hours and hours of concepts into, a quick little thing here, but the idea is find the root note, go back to 1 note in the scale, and that is the appropriate 7 for that chord in that key, or go up to the next note of the scale, and that's the appropriate 9 for that chord in the key. That's the gist. There are different ways you can, different names for those chords depending on the situation you're in, depending on what other notes you include or not, but I don't want to get into that right now. So yeah. I think I'm gonna grab my little sparkling fancy water thing here, and I see some good questions here, and I think maybe I'll just have to save them for next time. But I also want to let you know that if you like this kind of format, imagine instead of what looks like 100-something people that you have to fight with to get your question answered, it's something teen number of people, and I make sure to answer your question as thoroughly as possible. That's what my weekly office hours is over on my Patreon. $12 a month. For some people, I think just having weekly, your weekly questions answered is a good is a good deal for $12 a month. But I also have 200 plus other lessons available and courses that you can work through, and it's it's kind of been my life's work. I've been really pouring out everything I possibly can. The nuanced, tricky things that are weird to talk about, I've tried to figure out how to make those things make sense. My goal is to just help people be like the most holistic musician they can be. I'm not just teaching theory. I'm trying to help you understand how to use music theory to make music like this. I do deeper dives than this. I'm just really trying to make it a place where you can become a musician and have fun doing it at the same time. I've got weekly writing, not weekly, every other week writing challenges. It's a lot of fun. Come check it out. And in the meantime, I think I'm gonna try to do more live streaming on my YouTube channel here just to let people know I'm still alive. I'm still actively making lessons. I'm just not doing it on YouTube as often. Yeah. TJ, I understand. That sucks that a tornado destroyed your house. Definitely don't join my Patreon until you feel like you can afford $12 a month. I'm not trying to be pushy or anything. I'm just trying to let you know, if you like my channel here, I think you'll really love my online school. That's all. Smash that like button, folks. Now that we're at the end of the stream, I gotta confess that I was tempted to do the most unfitting thing for me, which was as soon as my live stream started, I was gonna go, "What's up, guys? Welcome to my channel." That really stresses me out. I like just keeping it chill, you know. Yeah. Oh, Namara Allen, I will say it's very rare that it sounds good for a bass line to add 9, and 7th chords work on some chords, like a minor 7 chord or a dominant 7 chord. You can include the 7, and it frequently happens in funk and soul, especially. Like, of course, I was going to end things, and now I'm answering a question that I like. Your basic bass sort of hangout zone, at least in my opinion, coming from like just being a big fan of funk and soul, is here's your root note, here's your 5th, here's your octave higher root, and then back here is your 7. And because we don't have a 3rd in here, this little simple bass line works for either a major, I should say a dominant chord, or works for a minor 7 chord. And that's using root 5/7 root 5/7 5 root. You know, like that's just sort of classic funk area. Led by Example 108 says, what's a healthy amount of practice per day or week? Can you practice too much? You can hurt yourself if you are using too much pressure or if you are ignoring signs of pain. You can definitely practice too much from that point of view. However, I don't think you can practice too much. I think that sometimes you can practice without being very mindful about what you're doing. And I'm a big believer in practice being either deliberate, sort of performing a song, trying not to think too hard, and then deliberate, really mindful, thoughtful. What did I do wrong? How could I do it better? Let me like really think through as specifically as possible how I could have done that better, and then practice really specifically the specific detailed things that are going to help with the specific problem areas. Most people don't practice well because they don't describe to themselves specifically what they're doing wrong, and they just keep trying over and over without stopping to assess why it's not working. But you could do that all day without hurting yourself, as long as you're just paying attention to your hands and your fingers and stuff. All right, everybody. I think this is it's a good time to call it a day. Thanks for hanging out. I'm gonna try to do this again soon. Yeah, thanks for hanging out. See you later.